And we're live. Welcome to episode 29 of Engaging the Eagle, exploring US foreign policy in Southeast Asia. I'm Kevin.
Hi, this is Adrian.
And we'll be your host for this episode, where we ask the question, what are the implications of Trump's tariffs for Japan? It goes without saying that US President Donald Trump's tariffs have really captured our imagination here in Asia. We were waiting with bated breath to see the tariff rate announcements just last week. Yet, it is also important to look past the specific tariff rates that Trump has threatened or assigned to each country. There are much broader issues at stake. How have Trump's tariffs impacted US engagement with Asian economies, particularly Japan? How is the Japanese government responding to his demands, and what can we expect going forward? To discuss this topic, we've invited Dr. Makio Miyagawa, Adjunct Senior Fellow at RSIS, to come on our show. Dr. Miyagawa has held successive positions at the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including Legal Desk Chief, Deputy Director of the US-Japan Trade Division and of the Russian Division, and Director within the Economic Affairs Bureau and Asia Oceania Bureau. Thanks for joining us today, Miyagawa-san.
Thank you for inviting me to a discussion on a very interesting subject.
Sure. And for the benefit of our audience, I was thinking of starting with a very basic question. President Trump announced a massive deal with Japan on July 22nd, alleging that Japan will invest $550 billion into the US at his direction, in his words, and create hundreds of thousands of jobs while opening the Japanese economy to more American products. What are your initial thoughts on this deal? I know that most of the details haven't been made public yet, but what have you heard and what do you think so far?
To start with, we have already committed to the US that $550 billion investment to the United States. But out of the total $6 trillion in global direct investment in the US, $800 billion has already been invested from Japan up till today. And Japan is the largest investor in the United States. In many cases, the returns from past investments in the United States have been reinvested in the US. So achieving this figure in the future seems not like an unimaginable scenario.
Okay.
The investment area will be and shall be particularly those related to economic security, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, steel, shipbuilding, critical minerals, and aviation. I forgot others, energy, I think, automobile also. You see, these areas are very important and shall be supported by Japanese government-affiliated financial institutions. You see, given the current strategic environment, strengthening cooperation between Japan and the US in the area of economic security is an urgent policy issue. So rather than a heavy burden, it is a positive policy for Japanese companies to invest in the US, and it would produce a good outcome between the two industries. So I feel that it is a positive. It can be interpreted as a positive move rather than a burden.
Okay, that's good to hear. And you're right. I believe that the cumulative capital that Japan has deployed in the US in terms of FDI is about, like you said, about $750 to $800 billion as of 2024. Although that does make me curious, though. How are Japanese government officials feeling about the deal? Do you think they're generally satisfied, or are there aspects, particularly in terms of the kind of products that Japan is being made to allow into the Japanese economy, that might be concerning to them?
When you spoke first, you referred to the investment. Therefore, I explained a positive element of the investment. But in total, there are a variety of elements which we think should be considered negative.
Yes.
You see, tariff rise is a negative figure, a negative policy. For the last 50 years in the world, the countries have agreed to lower the tariff rates so as to reinvigorate trade and economic activities. raising tariff would be a reverse move, creating some hindrances along the borders. And this would certainly reduce the economic activities. So therefore, we understood that raising tariff unilaterally is not a policy positively interpreted. And we have not discussed recently what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
We have already concentrated on how to respond to this a little regrettable engagement taken by the US. But at the same time, simply criticizing him is not productive.
Yeah.
We have to move ahead, so we have to create an agreement. And this is, I think, the general feeling of our bureaucracy in response to the US tariff rise unilateral.
I see. Thank you. I was curious as well. The top trade negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, he tweeted recently that it was mission complete now that the deal has come out. But do you think there's going to be a follow-up in the coming months or even over the next year or so where a Japanese delegation tries to push for even lower tariff rates? Or are they going to take it like this for now, possibly even for the rest of Trump's term in office?
Well, if I were, I have already graduated from the bureaucracy, therefore I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of our government. But if I were still in the government, in the Japanese government, I think I would not repeat a very unproductive process of negotiation simply to lower tariff rates. Tariff rates decide the prices of our exported goods to US market. But there are other factors which might decide the real prices in the US market. For instance, the foreign exchanges. I'm not saying that we would lower Japanese yen, but you see, there are many variety of factors which decide whether a business can succeed. So I think it's more productive to focus on how to make a good deal at the private sector level.
I see.
And tariff rates, as Mr. Trump insists to raise, is one factor. But we have to discuss many other factors. And simply, you see, quarreling on tariff rates for many months or many years is very unproductive, I think.
Yeah. I agree, yeah. There's a question of what can actually be achieved, and that should be the focus. We can get back to the discussion of the other factors that you mentioned, perhaps later on in the episode. But I would like to pick on something you mentioned. In your conversations with the Japanese business community, the private sector, what are their thoughts on the tariff negotiations and the trade deal so far?
I have not in depth discussed with the private sector up on the tariff rates, but they are still positive in engaging with the trade between Japan and US. You see, US is one of the biggest, or US the biggest market, but there are many markets all around the world.
Yes.
And we do have to continue maintaining a good relations, lower tariffs, lower barriers, or even zero barriers with many other countries. Quarreling with US on tariffs is not productive, as I said. We should concentrate on many other markets. Asia is a big market.
Speaking of other markets in Asia, we have also seen, as a result of the Trump administration's tariffs, a move by Japan, South Korea, and China to resume trilateral talks. Right? So do you see these trilateral talks moving forward and building up economic ties as a form of economic resilience to counter the Trump administration's tariffs?
Tripartite cooperation started at the turn of the century, and we are very happy to create a new cooperative engagement framework in Northeast Asia, we call Northeast Asia as compared to Southeast Asia, particularly ASEAN regions. Japan, China, and South Korea have created a very good discussing framework for over 20 some years. But as you can understand, this trilateral cooperation contains some political elements. We have another trilateral cooperation, including Japan and South Korea, with the US. US, South Korea, and Japan have also created a dialogues and cooperation amongst us. So therefore, when we emphasize all of a sudden the importance of Japan, China, South Korea, when Mr. Trump or the US has created a serious trade frictions or political frictions over tariffs, it would give a political message to US and to the region. So we have to be careful in simply shifting our importance from bilateral relations between Japan and US to a trilateral cooperation, Japan, China, South Korea. But at the same time, we are happy to expand our economic and political even cooperation amongst Japan, South Korea, and China, particularly when South Korea has already changed its president from, if I may say directly, from a right-winger to a slightly left-winger, conservative to progressive. I think I should use this word better. But anyhow, we are happy to respond to messages from Southeast Asia also, and from China, South Korea, that trilateral cooperation, Japan, South Korea, China, is very important. This year, we are the chair of the trilateral cooperation. So I think we would organize a summit meeting amongst the three nations.
Yeah. So if I could follow up on that, right, you also mentioned Southeast Asia. So when Prime Minister Abe was around, and when the US, under the Trump administration, pulled out of the TPP, Japan, under then Prime Minister Abe, stepped up to round up a lot of countries, the remaining countries of the TPP, to pursue the CPTPP. Do you see Japan being able to work now with other like-minded countries to perhaps rebuild a new multilateral trading order, or right to help reform the WTO?
So therefore, you would understand that our trade policy has been consistent through Mr. Abe's era and even today. Although we have to negotiate with the US, which is the biggest economy in the world and very powerful nation, many countries would have to negotiate with the US, therefore we have done. But at the same time, we would continue to pursue trade liberalization all around the world, not just all around the world, but in this region as well. So CPTPP is very symbolic. While US, you see, dropped out from the negotiation, we continued, we initiated, we encouraged other nations to join us. And now that US is creating some difficult circumstances, it was good. We started off several years ago and we continued, and we are very happy to expand it. And this would replace perhaps the role of WTO to a certain extent, because WTO is not working quite well.
Yeah, especially with the appellate body kind of paralyzed right now.
Yes. You see, we have been focusing on tariff issues.
Yeah.
Because it's caught attention of the whole world. But as you know very well, US policy, Mr. Trump's policy, is not just focused on tariff policy.
Yeah.
You know, BBB Act, big, beautiful bill, which is the second economic policy pillar for the US. The Trump administration has decided to lower the tax rates so as to provide benefits to the US citizens, particularly supporters of Republican parties. They are going to erase taxes upon tips, taxes upon overtime charges, or tax upon the pensions. And they are also going to lower the tax rate. Although their cumulative budget deficit is huge, $34 trillion, which is enormous. And the third economic policy of Mr. Trump is Genius Act, which is to provide stable coins on top of the dollar notes, which would certainly lead to a slightly lower US dollar, while keeping US dollar as a key currency in the world. It would give a negative impact upon central bank digital coins proposed by Lagarde and EU, or I think central bank also has studied the way how to introduce CBDC. But US stable coin is to be issued, backed up by the US dollar, and all around the world. It might have a very negative impact upon other digital currencies. So I think we should discuss the US policy, economic policy in total, not just in tariffs.
Yeah.
Tariff is one part. That's my sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we could sit here for another 2 or 3 episodes talking about Mr. Trump's economic policy and his cryptocurrency policies as well.
Yes,
but
that's right.
Maybe for a future episode. In the meantime, I was thinking of looking more towards history. I remember that talk you gave at RSIS, mentioning how you had a personal connection to the US-Japan economic talks back in the 1980s. Could you elaborate a bit more on that during this episode? And how do the current tensions now compare with Japan's experience during that decade?
That was a nightmare for myself.
Yes, oh dear.
I was in the US-Japan trade desk from 1989 to 1992, which is the worst a few years of Japan-US trade friction. We didn't call, friction trade war, but we talked that this is a very serious trade friction. And of course, our trade surplus vis-a-vis US was huge.
Yeah.
It's uncomparable to the current level. So US really wanted to reduce the trade surplus of Japan. US even wanted to create problems in the Japanese economy, production machines. So therefore they did a variety of things, and they created a number of hindrances upon our economy. But anyhow, as compared to the 1989-1992 circumstances, the current US-Japan trade negotiation, I think, is much lighter. If I may say, it's a very peaceful negotiation, I would think. And amongst other things, we have to bear in mind that the security or strategic environment has changed.
Yes.
In 1989, 1992, it was after the end of the Cold War. And the world has already entered a global cooperation era. But currently, a new confrontation has started. As I may have already explained to you, the front line of this confrontation is not in Europe, but now in Northeast Asia. So we have to create more collaborative security and strategic engagement, joint engagements with the US. So tariff, again, is one of the issues, but it's not a very heavy issue.
Yeah, it doesn't define the relationship in a major way, I suppose. That's a good way to put it. Actually, Dr. Miyagawa, just to follow up on that, during our previous episode, we had Professor Joseph Liao come on to talk about a study that he recently did with regard to how Southeast Asian countries are perceiving the US and China. And what he found in the study was that there was a noticeable shift that China held more influence with them as compared to the US. This wasn't a conscious shift in policy, but sometimes this happened through unconscious shifts accumulating over many years. But I was wondering if the Japanese government decided to hedge more with regard to the US. What do you think it would look like over the rest of Mr. Trump's term?
What do you mean by hedging the relationship? Are we supposed to lower the engagements with the US-Japan relations while intensifying our relations with China? Is it what you mean by hedging?
Not necessarily. I mean, it could be, rather than lessening the intensity with the US, it could be raising the intensity of cooperation with China, raising the intensity of cooperation with, say, the ASEAN countries, or even looking to Europe for more intensive cooperation, even while maintaining close ties with Washington.
I have already mentioned this in a variety of places in Southeast Asia. China has been catching up with us and has already overtaken us in terms of the GDP. Many asked me that Japan is not comfortable with Chinese leadership in this region. To these questions, I responded that, you see, when we created a good economic development policy called Flying Geese Formation, we took initiative and leadership in guiding other nations to further development of Asian economy. When we are tired, when a new leadership has appeared, we are very happy to let him or let her take us, showing us good leadership. So we are not unhappy. We are very encouraged to have a good, strong economic leadership in this region. But we have two reservations. If this leaders, you see, try to dominate the whole Asia by creating problems, causing hindrances, we have reservation. We have one more reservation. If this leadership tries to exert pressure strategically and causing some territorial problems in Southeast Asia, we have reservations. So we hope China will be a new China sometime in near future. Then we can, you see, without any reservations, move ahead and enjoy creating a good regional cooperation. I'm not saying that it would come to become like European Union in one day, but I think we can try as much as possible to settle our problems in this region, creating good cooperative framework in this region, helping each other for the future of our region.
Well said. Thank you.
Dr. Miyagawa, I wanted to bring our discussion to Japanese domestic politics,
Oh.
right? So Japan just recently had a upper house election in which the LDP and its affiliate party lost the majority in the house. Not just in Japan, but in a whole lot of other countries that we see, domestic politics is becoming increasingly important to foreign policy. Right. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see the trajectory of Japanese domestic politics affecting Japanese foreign policy? So, to put it in more concrete terms, right? Prime Minister Ishiba is still Prime Minister, but I think his position is quite precarious. There have been voices calling for his resignation. But we have seen a series of relatively weak Japanese prime ministers follow in the footsteps of Prime Minister Abe. So, how does a sort of more fractious Japanese domestic politics, right? We have the rise of this Sanseto party, which is like a Japan First populist party, right? Sort of the nature of Japan's domestic politics. How do you see it affecting Japanese foreign policy moving forward?
Well, that's a very good question. But I think still, we do not, well, the whole Japan does not put priority to its domestic policy to the foreign policy. I think foreign policy is also very important. It is quite true that our people, our voters, our citizens were at a loss how to welcome a leadership of our politics. When Mr. Abe passed away, as he was assassinated, it seems that our politics and politicians lost guidance and philosophy. Mr. Abe created a good philosophy, good guidance, good guiding light for our future domestic and foreign policy. And we agreed. And we were all delighted to have him as a new leader. And we hope he would continue to guide us and guide Japan. But it was a very bad luck. I feel very sorry for him that he was assassinated. And after his assassination, our politics strayed. And again, we returned to a very precarious political circumstances, which was symbolized by this upper house election. LDP lost, Komeito lost, and some other new parties surfaced, and we don't know how those parties can create a new platform. Because it was upper house, this turbulence formally does not affect the political leadership. If it is lower house, it will be, nightmare. It would have been a nightmare. But we don't know how much it would affect it. If Prime Minister Ishiba decides to step down, then lower house will be in a position to decide who would be the Prime Minister. And if lower house is in a position to decide who would become the Prime Minister, then the battle moves to the lower house. And if the battle moves to the lower house, then the new Prime Minister can come up from any party. And this will be very turbulent and unstable. We do not know how they would decide. And I think there is still a very serious discussions inside LDP. How much responsibilities Mr. Ishiba has to bear. Mr. Ishiba is still saying quite clearly that he would stay on. And as far as he stays on, this leadership will not change for another 2 years. But the stability would have to be transmitted to a new political strength. And that's the problem.
I just also want to add, maybe we've been talking about tariffs all this time, right? So one development that has also come about in the last several months is the US is also still on track now to transform US forces Japan command into a warfighting command after Japan has created their own joint command. If we are not talking about tariffs and we're talking about the defense side of the US-Japan alliance, that still seems to be very strong, definitely, I think, at the institutional level.
That's right. I think we have developed a good structure, organization in the Japanese defense forces, Japanese self-defense forces. This also reflects the strategic environment in this region. We created a good strategic command in self-defense forces, which would collaborate with the US command control organization. And there will be more in-depth collaborations between the two commands.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Miyagawa. Yeah, we'll have to pick up that thread in a future episode as well. One talking more broadly about US-Japan cooperation, maybe with respect to South Korea as well. But in the meantime, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience with? Want to elaborate on a little more from just now?
One thing I would let you understand is the situation in China, inside China. We do not know the result of the discussions in the fourth Central Committee meeting due in October. But I'm very interested in what would happen in this conference as Chinese politics is very heavy in giving influence in this region. Let us look at the course of internal political dialogues and developments in Beijing. Thank you. We may be able to discuss after this conference.
Yes, after October, that's right. And in the meantime, we'll need to keep a close watch on what's going on in the US, particularly, its economic figures, especially after the very weak jobs report that just came out. Who knows what's going to happen in a month or two, maybe even 3. Yes, there are a lot of moving pieces in this puzzle. In the meantime, though, thank you very much, Dr. Miyagawa, for your time.
Thank you for inviting me, and we look forward to continuing dialogues.
We do too. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If there are any questions or topics that you'd like us to tackle in future episodes, feel free to reach out to us on social media or through email. Until next time, stay safe and we'll see you again.